So we've already covered if you should make a business or not, decision matrix, so you could think about that. But at a certain point, you're going to want to make a business. So Paul, when should people start thinking about, hey, I should make a business here? And then how do they go about doing it? We'll focus specifically on USA seller now, and then we could cover if you're international, because it's a little bit different.
Sure. So sort of as we discussed before, when you know it's for you, when you've looked at the risks and hopefully consulted counsel, but you've looked at the risks involved of your business, what you have to lose, and you kind of get to that point, this is real. I want to be a business. I'm going to be an Amazon seller. I'm going to be an e-commerce seller. I need to form a business. You're going to now be presented with a number of choices. The LLC is the most common choice. And I tend to think that for most sellers, that tends to be the one that they pick. Obviously, caveat, we're having a discussion. This is not direct legal advice, but it's the most popular vehicle appropriate for most sellers. But as you pointed out, the state of incorporation or the state of organization matters. The differences in how you are protected vary from state to state, as well as, how you form it. There's a lot of generic legal options out there for forming an LLC that get the job done, but, they're not probably going to be all that great if you actually need to lean on them for the intended purpose, which is asset protection. I kind of caution people not to just kind of hastily form an LLC on, some legal software site and do that, because you're sort of missing the point. I mean, you want to have the appropriate asset protection, language in your operating agreement. You want specific stated purposes, things like that. Those are things that lawyers do that you're not going to get from a software company. I always encourage people to seek counsel, as self-serving as it may sound. I recognize that. But a lawyer that knows this stuff, it would be important. An asset protection specialist.
Yeah. So I'm going to come in and summarize here, because you just said a lot. So basically, you're saying there's many options. When you want to make a business, that you could go use a software online, or I guess the most simple, you could just fill the form out yourself from the secretary, or you go get somebody who's going to help you set it up right. But what you're saying is when you want to make a company, it's just a protection vehicle and an asset that you're building, and that you're saying that you could try to go fill out a form and hope that you did it right, but you might want to get counsel to make sure you did it right. Otherwise, what was the point of making something that's not protectable? Is that's basically what you're saying in most simple terms?
Yeah. I mean, you have to think about your personal financial situation and, these corporations or LLCs being sort of a barrier, right? We're putting up a barrier between a potential creditor and you, going after you personally. And that corporation is that barrier. How well that barrier works depends on how well it was made, right? Will it ever be, tried to the end of the earth? Will you be going to court? No, probably not. But when you're a personal injury lawyer, so let's say you make a product and there's a strict liability issue, because a lot of sellers don't recognize that they could be at risk of being sued when the product is defective, even if it's not your fault, even if it's because it broke into Amazon's warehouse, it could still be you who is sued and held liable for the loss. If a personal injury lawyer is going to come after you and they see sort of a Wyoming special that was formed in some software company, they're probably going to push pretty hard to pierce the corporate veil, which is what we call it. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little later, and go after your personal assets. But if you do it right, well, now you've built barriers and defenses. And those barriers and defenses work really well with insurance policies, because now the personal injury lawyers are more likely to look at the insurance limits and want to take that, because you've made their lives much harder for them to come after you personally. But if you're worth a couple $100,000, $1 million, $2 million, and that's all that is a barrier, is that, I call it the legal Zoom special, not to, the legal Zoom special on Wyoming. That lawyer is going to have a pretty good opportunity to tear that apart, especially if it's a single member, single owned LLC. And that's usually why people want an LLC as opposed to being, in a sole proprietorship. So it just makes sense. If you're going to do it for that purpose, then do it for that purpose and do it right. It does cost more, but the point is it's like an insurance policy. You're buying an insurance policy. It's part of the process.
Oh, that's a good way to think about it. Never thought about it like that. But yeah, the basic thing is that your company is just an asset that you're building, and it is a protection also. So also thinking further down the road, if it's something serious and you want to sell it, somebody wants to buy something that is probably set up correctly and has good barriers and isn't just full of holes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing when we do M&A, mergers and acquisition deals with clients, it depends on what side of it we're on. If I'm on the buy side, I'm going to tear apart the other side's company and say that they have all of these risks out there to basically get a price reduction, right? And so, the state of California could come after you, even though I advocate strongly against the state of California. There's an opportunity now to buy Amazon companies because, people are so afraid of the state governments that you could say, oh, well, then you're at risk for this, or you're at risk because you didn't manufacture this right, or you have a Prop 65 risk in California. That's what you're going to do as a a buyer's attorney, as a seller's attorney, it's the opposite. You've got to fend that off, right? I mean, you're going to want to say, no, we have a well-made company. We've got this insulation, that insulation. You're going to want to have that structure. These are all things that really pay off at a time when your company has value. It sort of sucks to have to do it early on. And that's not to say that you couldn't do it later. It certainly raises concerns. You don't want to just close down your company and start a new one. It can create tax issues. So again, another reason why you want to consult with a lawyer before you do it, but you can do it. It should be done. You want a well set up company with a good operating agreement. Same thing if you have partners. I mean, if you're in business with other people, you want an operating agreement that's going to really cover what happens if something goes wrong. I mean, what happens if somebody, God forbid, somebody you're working with passes away and then, now their spouse controls the company, right? Because you didn't have the right provisions in your operating agreement. So, things like this happen all the time. We see it all the time, which is why we keep telling people, get advice from an attorney, understand what's out there. It's for your own protection. It's luring to want to use a software company. They are a little bit cheaper. I mean, they're not a lot cheaper. I mean, I don't know, is it hundreds of dollars cheaper, maybe $1,000 at most, but it's a small amount of money relative to what you're trying to do as far as protecting your business and making sure your business retains its value.
Yeah, I agree with that. I started out way back in the day, with just how Paul suggested, or, how other people will suggest, just getting started. And then when it's like, hey, this is something serious, then definitely consulted professionals. Definitely a good thing to think about. If you're building something that is going to be your entire life, basically, you want it to not be built on stilts, in my personal opinion. So we talked about the options. Simple. You just fill out the form from the Secretary of State. And if you know what you're doing, I guess that's the technically cheapest way. Then there's all these softwares and services out there that'll help you fill out the form, but still make sure you fill it out right if you do it yourself. And then if you want somebody to help make sure everything is done and tailored to you, then you can go to professionals to make sure that it's done right. Paul helps people with forming. Was that a pretty accurate decision tree matrix there?
It is. It's just what your priorities are. I mean, I don't think that doing it yourself, it may work fine for you if nothing happens. Honestly, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of difference. If everything works smoothly in life and your business, forming it online is perfectly fine and doing it yourself could be perfectly fine. People come to us because they're worried about the unknown, the uncertainty, and we're trying to bring them as much of that certainty as we can by planning for contingencies. I mean, that's what lawyers do, right? We help you plan for the unknown, unexpected, right? Because what is unexpected to you, we've probably seen it before, which is why we write things the way we write them. That's why my operating agreements contain proprietary asset protection provisions that nobody else can use, because we've been through it and we think about it a lot and things are always changing. But, you can totally go online and you will be an LLC. It's very easy to do and have a bank account and name the LLC. It just may not be very good.
I like that analogy you said of insurance. I mean, technically, you could drive a car with no car insurance. Well, that's technically against the law, but it could technically play out perfectly for you if you never got in an accident.
Never got pulled over, never got in an accident, right?
You got in one. That's a good analogy for people. Awesome. Sweet. Well, if you guys have any questions, let us know. I hope that this was helpful. It's definitely helpful. Thanks, Paul. Now we'll go on to the next topic.